Hey, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to All Hands on Deck. I am Reverend Ira Acree, your host, and my co-host is the beautiful businesswoman, reporter, business lady, community leader, Doris Davenport. She's in the studio. She will be taking the reins on the second part of this show. Today, I'm so excited to host again All Hands on Deck, discovering these issues and discussing very important, challenging information. I'm the pastor of Greater St. John Bible Church, and I'm also the CEO of the Austin Empowerment Coalition. We have a great show planned for you today, and we want to hear from you. Our number into the studio is 312-738-160. We have a great show planned for you. Today, our first guest is a local pastor who is really on the cutting edge as it relates to social justice. He pastors a church. He is a member of this great organization called the Leaders Network, which is a social justice organization that's West Side based. And it's one of the premier social justice organizations in our city. He's a member there, and he works also at World Vision. But he pastors a church called Suburban Life, and it's a white church, yet he submits under the authority of West Side African American church leadership. Welcome to the show, Reverend Tim Hokstra.
Thank you, Reverend Acree. It's great to be here and great to talk about what this really means and the significance of it.
Absolutely. Reverend Hokstra, you recently delivered a very stirring and electrifying message dealing with the theme of dismantling whiteness. You delivered that message at the Leaders Network last week at the Columbus Park Refectory. Now, I must confess, I've never in my life heard such a compelling, emotional message on race relations delivered from a white pastor in that setting. Now, we as African American clergy, we have been preaching, we have been teaching, we have been marching, and we have been talking about and advocating for equality and racial parity for years as we go through the 4 stages of our Freedom Symphony. We were number 1. The first stage was liberation from slavery, and then the right to vote, and then ending legal segregation. And then now we are into the fourth stage of access to capital. So it's very refreshing to see more of our white clergy, white ministers, come out and tackle this 800-pound proverbial gorilla that we are dealing with every day. So what's going on in the world to ignite such an awakening among a generous or a decent percentage of white clergy now? Last week we had Daniel Hill, who's writing a book on race and where the evolution of white supremacy came from. What inspired you to take your ministry down this path of addressing the institutional racism that exists for the very benefit of establishing and perpetuating privilege and power for whites? Just tell us that right away.
Well, it begins probably when I go back to my very roots of being born and raised on the south side of the city in the Roseland neighborhood.
Sure.
And when I was in 6th grade, my family was a part of white flight. I asked a lot of questions about it. There weren't a lot of answers at that time. Got isolated away from having to ever think about it until about 20 years ago when I wasn't planning on it. Our church was simply trying to broaden its experience and ask God to show us the way. He introduced us to an African American pastor on the west side, Reverend Clarence Hilliard, And
Reverend Hilliard was a real bona fide civil rights leader who flew under the radar.
He did. He did.
He was pro-black and very progressive.
Very progressive. He was 67 years old when I met him, had experiences with Dr. King, Malcolm X, and he knew the deal. And he just told me, I don't have any time to mess around with white folks. I've been down that road. And I believe today that God just produced these words out of me in order to affect what was to come. And I just said, all I want to do is submit to you and submit my church to you. We bring nothing. We want to learn, teach us. And that's really where it started. And
your church is submitted under black authority. What does that really mean? What does that mean?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's deep intentionality behind those words. I think they can easily be kind of taken for granted or heard, but deeply it means that wherever we go, whether we're in the suburbs or in the city, we are under black leaders. So I don't try to take the lead. I don't try to bring things to bear on it until I'm invited by local black leadership. And so we continually place ourselves under to say we are under and with and learning and listening. And we want to actually dump racism on its ugly head that in the past we know and continues to be true. Whiteness takes the lead. We're saying we want to flip it and we want to go completely the other direction and give ourselves that way.
We're calling this show All Hands on Deck because we believe we need all institutions involved if we're really going to be a catalyst for change, if there's really going to be some parity and equity for all of God's children. Listen, we got a loaded show today. We have a guest from the NAACP, the West Side president. I'm going to welcome him to the show, Mr. Carl Brinson. I want to give him a moment to basically tell us about the announcement of the march and the rally that's going to take place as we fight for police reform in Chicago. Carl Brinson, my friend, welcome to the show. All hands on deck.
Ira Acree, how you doing? Good evening. Sorry for the late delay and everything, but just been busy ripping and running in a couple of meetings in and out of meetings dealing with this whole dissent decree. The rally we're speaking in terms of, we're trying to hold it. It'll be held on the 29th of September.
So the rally for the consent decree and engagement positions for the community will be September 29th. And what time is that?
It'll be at 12 o'clock. It'll be 12 noon in front of City Hall on LaSalle Street. It's
so very important that we be there at noon, September 29th, as we fight for seats on the advisory board or the steering committee, because we've got to have some voices at the table who know about this pain firsthand. We need community leaders there, and we need to hear from the victims, not just the community leaders, people who have been hurt. And Carl, we really appreciate your commitment and the NAACP for all of the hard work and the effort. We want to get you into the studio and let you talk about this extensively because you are certainly a champion on that issue. We're going to give you a few seconds to tell us a little about what you expect to happen on that day.
Well, on that day, we expect how they say on Sunday morning, we won't hold you long. We're not going to be there for a long time. We're going to be there for about an hour. What we want to do is we want to get across to the city, get across to the world, appealing to the mayor, appealing to the AG, that our community has to have a seat at that table when it comes to negotiating, participating, and enforcing that dissent decree. We can't leave it in the hands of the two elected officials to come out with a decree that's supposed to reflect us and represent us and be reformed for us without having input and participating in enforcement of that decree. So we're rallying that Friday to let them know that not having the community at the table is unacceptable to enter into a dissent decree.
Carl, we really thank you so much for calling in. We had a loaded schedule today, but man, I wanted to get you on, and we want to get that flyer. Get it to me, text it to me, give it to Doris, e-blast it to the the leaders of the Leaders Network. We want to get the word out because that's a big deal. Thank you so much. We got to have you back on the show. We appreciate all that you guys are doing at the NAACP West Side location. Thank you, Carl.
Thank you, and Mrs. Davenport, for having me. Sorry for our tardiness, but we appreciate it and we welcome the support we're getting. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, we need your help here with this. This is a big deal. Since you have submitted under the authority of the Black Church, I'm telling you, we need your help.
Yeah, we'll be there with it for sure.
All right. This is one of the gentlemen who went down to Washington with us when Al Sharpton called for 1,000 ministers. When he called for 1,000 ministers and faith leaders to meet us in Washington, he's one who committed to going and kept his word. Listen, let me ask you, what actually is the concept you envision of dismantling whiteness? What does it entail? And what are you realistically expecting to see when you talk about dismantling whiteness?
Well, I think increasingly for me over the years, things just keep coming together and coming together and coming together as I watch the current of the day. And I think I look at the entirety of so much of history now, even watching the Vietnam special that Ken Burns has put forward, and you see what's present there, white colonialism that has put its hands on everything. I've traveled all through Africa. White colonialism has put its hands on. So this thing called whiteness, it makes no real sense, really, but it has all this power. I mean, what is it really, whiteness?
You seem to be rather frustrated with it. You know, and honestly, I often tell people when I hear people make the case for it. Now, if you're frustrated with it, can you imagine how I feel?
I can, and I shared that story at that Leaders Network meeting where you and I sat knee to knee in the airport, and you told me, I don't get it. I cannot understand why, because of the color of my skin, that there's just this much hatred. And this thing called whiteness, I think, has just found a life of its own that's gone way past its borders. I mean, I trace my roots to a European country, not to a color called whiteness.
Right.
That's a weird, made-up terminology that pulled together people that came here who were Irish or Polish from a particular ethnic background. And suddenly we brought this whole thing together called whiteness, and we just carried it over from European colonialism.
That's exactly right.
And we gave it this power and this influence that the whole world tilts toward a particular people of a color.
The whole world.
The whole world.
Many people suggest that it only takes place in India, but it's a universal caste system that's been around for a few hundred years.
That's right. That's right. Wherever I go, I see it. It really is troublesome to me that even when I go to Africa, that I, as a white male, am so revered there. There's something troubling about that, really, because we want to revere the indigenous people of that land.
What is your strategy for getting white people to embrace this? It's going to be tough enough getting the evangelical right who support Donald Trump to embrace this, let alone white people of no faith. And you got 30 seconds to answer.
I believe that's a tough road, but I'm committed to it. I know our church is committed to it. We plan to devote the rest of our time, whatever God gives to me as a pastor and as a person, to that we have got to keep calling out to white folks to learn, to engage, to understand, to not bury their heads. So it's going to be something that I just keep calling for and calling for and calling for. We educate as much as we can. We tell the story of what's alive. We bring people with us into the Austin neighborhood and the West Side so that they learn from being present, being with, and try to undermine the power of this thing.
And you know what? It took us 300 to 400 years to get in this predicament, and it's not going to be over in a matter of decades. It won't even happen in me and your lifetime.
I don't think so.
But we'd love to make some headway in the little time God has given us. Listen, Tim, man, you've been incredible, and we really appreciate you coming on, being the guest for me and Doris. We're going to be transitioning right now. We thank you for being on,
Yep.
and we will continue to have this discussion because it's vitally important that we have some equity and parity among the races. Thank you so much. Doris, it's on you to take over from here. Thank you.
Great. Hello. We are so pleased to be back with you again. That was a wonderful conversation. Oh my goodness. Talk about Pastor Acree just never ceases to amaze me at all the things that he's aware of. I mean, you can't, he takes these deep dives in these conversations each week, and it just shows in the interviews. I just love him for it. Well, listen, I want to let you know, one of the most popular attractions in the city of Chicago that draws people from around the world is the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. And I am pleased to introduce to you Sheila Dawson-Jones, who is the director of the African American Network for the Chicago Symphony Center. Welcome, my friend, to All Hands on Deck.
Well, thank you so very much, Doris.
You are so welcome. Listen, tell us, what is it that makes the Chicago Symphony Orchestra so special that draws so many people?
Well, perhaps number one is the fact that it is the greatest orchestra in the country.
Yes.
On the planet, I would say number one. Various people have different other opinions, but I will say the strategic orientation of the commitment to excellence. In excellence, I mean, we're celebrating our 126th year. Wow. 126 years. And that history is a history which is always been focused on how do we go the next step? What is the new challenge for each century or each decade? Let's say it this way. And I am so proud to be a part of making history because of our fabulous music director, Ricardo Muti, the Zell, music director of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, who has a vision, and that vision is a part of the vision for the Chicago Symphony Orchestra to redefine the purpose and the color of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra's outreach or engagement.
Speaking of color, tell
Yes.
me, I know you are up close and personal. I have witnessed your passion. I've witnessed your advocacy. Why are you so determined to expose the African American community to classical music and, of course, to the Chicago Symphony?
Well, there are a couple reasons. One of the most specific one has to do with exactly what was being discussed in the last segment, actually,
Yes.
with Reverend Acree, and I'm sure I mispronounced the name.
No, that's
But
right.
the thing is, listen, to me, it is important to understand that the issue of our being human has black people on this planet and in this country to understand the integrity and the dignity that we have born in us, no matter what the 400 years have brought.
Yes.
That dignity, in spite of all of that, we were given a special gift, and that gift is a gift of music and art and creativity. The fact that classical music, and I just did a seminar in Benedictine University,
Yes.
a seminar entitled Classical Composers of African Descent Through the Years, from the 1700s to the present time. Just a couple samples, and this is known that people of African descent, and I've got to say that now because that's the way we got to look at it, that were it not for a few of them, Ignacio Sancho, he brought into being the work of Bach and Haydn. Haydn conferred with him. A young man who was called at the time an African, he was a black composer, and he's not bad to look at. His name is Saint-Georges, and I have to say it the French, Saint-Georges de Chevalier, and he was at the time of Mozart. And matter of fact, part of my lecture, which is nice, I'm going to do more of them. He got under Mozart's skin because he was 11 years older. He wrote so many operas and classical music and symphonies and orchestral works. We did a couple of his violin, piano sonatas. I'm a pianist as well and an opera singer. But the thing is, just knowing that we are not new to this, that classical music was part of our contributions to civilization. The fact that, when we came over, Branford Marsalis made a joke when he came to a concert at Symphony Center. He says, so you are the, and people will be a little mad, but I see you're the Harriet Tubman of the season. And Maestro Muti conferred with me on the fact, he said, I asked you, Sheila, I only want to know one thing. Why do the blacks not come? He looked at the beautiful music, he looked at the audience, and they weren't there. And he said, but I know this music is in them, and I know they why? I said, well, we did a number of things. I said, number one, we're going to make a commitment to bring that richness into this hall. We're going to bring that all of the culture into this hall. We're going to open our doors not just to classical but gospel. I'm even trying to figure out how to get the Bucket Boys in there, into concerts and events, educationals. The idea is this is our home. And Symphony Center, and that's what the CSO has been for 125 years. It can be a home. It's a sanctuary, not just for people who don't look like us. And that sanctuary is what we're working on right now. Maestro said, Muti, he said, when I leave this place, he said it before the audiences, at the end of every season, I don't want my legacy to be that we had great music and great musicians. We know that. I want that this place is filled with those in need, who need to be here, who don't know that this is their legacy. And so the amount of passion I have is because I happen to believe this is a security situation. We talk about frontline security for the nation, weapons and all this, but quite frankly, the security of my children, our children, is music and classical art. A means by which they can use art as their own identifier. This is their ID. So they know that they are valuable. I can't take it when a child asks me, when I die, Mrs. Jones, will I be recycled? Oh. Have that said to you in a little child, because they don't believe there's any value in their lives. So we want to restore that value. We're going to get them through this underground railroad of murder, because quite frankly, what we're facing with, it benefits the white population as well. They don't know exactly what they are made up of either.
Yeah, this is true. And I recall back in when John H. Johnson was alive, the Johnson Publishing Company, he had a collection of art and literature that was just untouched, uncomparable to a lot. He had some textbooks, or shall I say hardbound books from the 15th century that were written by black composers. Correct. And when I saw those, I was just astounded. I was amazed. I said, look at this. These are text, hardbound books written by black composers in the 15th century. Correcto. And we think our time started post-slavery. Right. I'm so glad you're here to give us this education. Listen, every time I mention Maestro Ricardo Muti's name, people just light up like he's electric or something. First of all, I want to thank you. I'm so lucky to be coming to the CSO ball Friday night, and I know that this is, we're going to be featuring Maestro Muti, conducting the Tchaikovsky violin concerto, and there's a violin soloist there as well. I'm not sure if you're aware, but he's going to be coming to Oak Park. Yes. He's coming to lead a rehearsal of the Symphony of Oak Park and River Forest, and we're so excited about that. Yes. But you have to tell us now, what is it about this man that just lights up people's world? There's something so special about him.
Well, when somebody has a light inside of them, a light that is not is not of this world. Yes. Who doesn't care what the world necessarily thinks about what they're doing, but they are moved by something that is dangerous. When he and I started conferring about building this African American network and the idea, I just said, I'll do it. I'll figure something out. And he said, I want to make concerts available.
Let me tell you.
And he did. Well, let's put it this way. I'm kind of crazy. So I kind of,
okay,
honey bear. I kind of believe, and this is the E, you only live once. My husband, as you know, passed away of 40 years on February, and he was my anchor. We're both opera singers. We both worked with this. And the whole thing was about, with Maestro, if you want to know the secret, what he actually said, he said, Sheila, we're going to do this. You're going to open the doors up. You're going to educate. But he said, we're not just educating, we're bringing them in.
great. That
Right.
is so
We're bringing
wonderful.
them
Sheila Dawson-Jones, I want to thank you so much for joining us here today at All Hands on Deck, where we are committed to empowering the marginalized and encouraging the masses to be catalysts for change. Please join us next week. We will be hosting our final show for this quarter, and we don't want you to miss it. Pastor Ira Acree and I will be here with you next Tuesday at 4:30 p.m. We'll see you then. Thank you.